Hey everyone, I bet some of you listening are running your own small businesses, or at least thinking about starting one. And one of the biggest hurdles, well, one of the things that's always top of mind is funding, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, today we're diving deep into a company that's trying to change the game when it comes to small business financing. Phoenix Lender Services, they actually just launched this month, and their whole mission is to make getting capital through SBA and USDA loans way easier.
It's interesting because they're not just offering like another loan product. What they're really doing is taking on the entire process from start to finish. We're talking underwriting, closing, servicing, even liquidation if it comes to that.
Wow. So they're not just giving you the money, they're like holding your hand through the whole process of these loans, which can be really complicated.
Yeah, SBA loans can be really complex. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of regulations. But with Phoenix, they're saying, small business owners and lenders, you focus on what you do best. Let us handle all the details.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. But to be honest, like a lot of financing companies pop up and they make all these promises and then they kind of fizzle out. What makes Phoenix different? Are they legit?
Well, that's where their connection to Community Bankshares Inc. comes in, and Community Bank and Trust.
Okay.
CB&T is a major player in the SBA lending world. Actually, just last quarter, they were ranked the 25th most active in the U.S.
25th. So they're not just some tiny little operation.
No, not at all. I mean, they're bringing decades of experience, proven systems to the table. So this partnership, I think, gives Phoenix instant credibility and a ton of resources. It's a real signal that they're here to stay and to make a real impact.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is a big deal. But what about the people running the show? Who's actually behind all of this at Phoenix?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The leadership team at Phoenix has a combined experience of over 700 years in financing, and they've facilitated over $31 billion in loans.
Hold on. 700 years. That's a lot of birthdays.
Yeah, a lot of birthdays. We're talking about people like Chris Hearn. He's the president and CEO. And he's been a real champion for small businesses for decades. And then you have Jeremy Gilpin, the chairman of the board for CBI, and he's a powerhouse in USDA business lending, which are loans specifically for rural businesses.
Oh, okay. So these aren't just like a bunch of guys who are learning on the job.
Oh, no, not even close. They've seen it all. They've navigated every hurdle. They know exactly how to make these loan programs work for both borrowers and for lenders.
Okay, so I'm sold on the experience part. But for like a small business owner out there, what does all this mean for them? Does it actually make getting a loan that much easier?
That's the big question, right? And that's where Phoenix's end-to-end approach really comes into play. Instead of having to shop around for different providers at each stage of the loan process, you're working with one team who understands SBA loans, USDA loans, like the back of their hand.
So less running around, less paperwork, less hassle.
Exactly. It really streamlines the entire experience. It makes it less daunting, more accessible. And, for lenders, it frees them up to focus on what they do best, which is serving their customers,
Yeah.
building those relationships.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned USDA loans a couple of times. Could you break that down a little bit? I think some people might not be familiar with what those are.
Sure. So USDA loans are specifically designed to help businesses in rural areas. They're backed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And they offer some unique advantages like lower interest rates and longer repayment terms. And with Phoenix's expertise in USDA lending, they can really help businesses in those rural communities tap into those resources.
That's fantastic, especially for businesses that might not have as many traditional options in those areas.
Right. It's all about creating a more level playing field,
Yeah.
expanding access to capital for everyone.
Now, I'm kind of curious, what does Phoenix actually do for lenders? Like, why would a bank work with them?
That's a great question. You see, handling SBA and USDA loans can be a real headache for lenders. There's a lot of specific regulations and compliance requirements, and Phoenix takes all of that off their plate.
Oh, okay.
They handle the whole back-end process so the lenders can focus on their core businesses.
So it's like having a dedicated team of SBA and USDA experts working behind the scenes.
Exactly. Phoenix becomes like an extension of the lenders team, providing specialized knowledge and support. And this allows lenders to say yes to more small business loans without having to build out like huge internal departments.
But the win-win for the borrowers and the lenders.
Yeah.
But how does all this benefit someone who's not directly involved in getting a loan? What's the bigger picture here?
Well, think about it this way. When small businesses have easier access to funding, they can grow and create jobs. And that means more economic activity, more opportunity. and stronger communities.
Hmm.
And when those businesses are in underserved communities, that impact is even greater.
So it's about more than just money. It's
Yeah.
about creating this like ripple effect of positive change
And this
throughout the whole economy.
exactly.
Now, I was going to ask about that. You mentioned earlier that Phoenix is focused on serving underserved communities. What does that actually look like? How does that play out?
Well, it's built into their mission from day one. They prioritize working with minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, businesses in rural areas. They've even achieved Preferred Lender Program Designation, or PLP, through their partnership with CB&T.
Okay, hold on. You're going to have to break that one down for me. What is a PLP designation, and why is it such a big deal?
Okay, so the PLP designation, it means that they can streamline the loan approval process while still meeting all the regulatory requirements. It's a huge advantage because it means less red tape for borrowers and faster access to funding.
So it's like getting the green light to move faster, but you're not cutting any corners.
Exactly. And for a small business owner, that can be the difference between, seizing an opportunity or missing out.
That's huge. But wait, if they're streamlining the process, doesn't that mean there's more risk of things slipping through the cracks? How do they make sure that everything is still done by the book?
That's where their experience and expertise come in. They have a deep understanding of the regulations. And they're very meticulous about compliance. They've got systems in place to make sure everything is done correctly, even with a faster approval process.
So it's all about efficiency, not cutting corners.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to make the process smoother and faster without compromising on quality or compliance.
This is really impressive. But what does this all mean in the bigger picture? What are Phoenix's long-term goals? Where do they see themselves in 5, 10 years?
This is where it gets really exciting. They're not just trying to make a quick buck. They're trying to change the game. They want to grow the entire SBA and USDA lending industries.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is. And it all comes back to their end-to-end approach. It's not just about convenience. It's about creating a model that's efficient, that's scalable, and ultimately replicable. They want to prove that these loans can be a win for everyone involved, not just the borrowers.
I see. So they're like the pioneers. They're forging a new path for the entire industry.
Exactly. They're proving that it's possible to do well by doing good. And that's a message that I think could have a ripple effect throughout the whole financial landscape.
Okay, before we get too carried away with the big picture, let's bring it back to our listeners. If someone is hearing all of this and thinking, this sounds great, but is Phoenix right for me? What would you say?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on your individual circumstances. But if you're a small business owner looking for funding, especially if you're in an underserved community or a rural area, Phoenix is definitely worth checking out. They offer a unique blend of experience, expertise, and commitment. It's hard to find that anywhere else.
So it's all about finding the right partner, someone who understands your needs and can help guide you through the process.
Precisely. And that's where Phoenix shines. They're not just about processing loans. They're about building relationships, empowering businesses to succeed.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about their mission, their experience, their commitment to underserved communities, the benefits that they offer to borrowers and lenders. I'm starting to see why they're making such a splash in the lending world. But there's always more to this story.
You bet. And that's what we're going to be digging into in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to take a closer look at how their end-to-end approach actually works in practice, the challenges that they face, and the potential impact they could have on the future of small business lending.
I'm intrigued. We'll be back in a moment to continue our exploration of Phoenix Lender Services. Stay with us. Okay, so we're back and ready to dig even deeper into Phoenix Lender Services. Before the break, we were talking about their goal of actually growing the entire SBA and USDA loan industries, which is a pretty big vision.
Yeah, it's ambitious. And it all comes back to that end-to-end approach, It's not just about convenience for the borrower. It's about creating a model that's efficient, scalable, and ultimately something that other lenders can replicate. They want to prove that these loans, that they can be a win for everybody, not just the borrower.
Okay, I get the theory, but I'm a pretty practical person. So walk me through it. Let's say I'm a small business owner and I walk into Phoenix's office. What happens next?
Okay, so imagine this. You've got this great idea for a business, but you need funding. You walk into Phoenix maybe feeling a little intimidated by the whole loan process, and they just sit down with you. No jargon, no pressure. They really want to understand your business, your goals, what challenges you're facing.
So it's more like a partnership than like It's a sales pitch.
Exactly. They're not trying to just push a product. They're trying to figure out what the right solution is for you. And that might be an SBA loan, it might be a USDA loan, or it might be something else entirely.
Okay, I like that flexibility. So let's say they do figure out an SBA loan is the best option. What happens then?
Then they guide you through the whole process. They help you gather all the documentation, which, let's be honest, can be a real pain. They make sure your application is strong, that you understand all the terms and conditions. And here's the key. They don't disappear once the loan is approved. They handle all the servicing, making sure the payments are made, managing escrow accounts, ensuring you're in compliance with all the regulations.
So it's like, even after you get the money, you've still got this team of experts that's there to help you.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They're there to support you every step of the way, answering any questions, addressing concerns, just making sure the loan is really working for you.
That's got to be invaluable for a small business owner.
Oh yeah, for sure. It lets them focus on what they do best, running their business, without that added stress of managing a complicated loan.
Now, you mentioned compliance a couple of times. Now, I know that can be a really big hurdle, especially with SBA and USDA loans. How does Phoenix address that? Are they just as strict as a traditional bank would be?
I would say even more so. They have a whole team of compliance specialists. These guys live and breathe these regulations. They're always monitoring for changes, updating procedures, making sure everything's done by the book. They know that compliance isn't just about avoiding penalties. It's about protecting the borrowers and the lenders.
Okay, so they're taking the headache out of compliance for everyone involved.
Yeah, and that's a big selling point for lenders. You know, some of them might be hesitant about SBA or USDA loans because of all the regulations. But Phoenix is saying, look, we got this. You focus on what you do best.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this whole system works. But let's be real, no system's perfect. What are some of the challenges they might face? Are there any downsides to this approach?
Well, I think one challenge is just awareness. A lot of people just don't know about SBA and USDA loans, even some lenders.
So there's like an education gap.
Yeah, exactly. Phoenix needs to get the word out, not just about what they do, but about how these loans work, the benefits they offer. They've got to convince borrowers and lenders that this is a viable option, and that's a big task.
So how are they doing that?
Well, they're really investing in outreach and education, building relationships with community banks and credit unions, hosting webinars, creating resources for small business owners. They're becoming like advocates for these loan programs.
That makes sense. But even if they get the word out, are there any limitations to this model, this end-to-end approach?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is there's a risk that by streamlining things, you might lose some of that personal touch, that
Yeah.
some borrowers really need.
Right, so they can't just become a loan processing machine.
Exactly. They need to remember they're dealing with people, not just numbers. They need to be responsive, build trust with borrowers and lenders.
That human element is so important for sure. So we talked about the economic impact, but what about the social impact? How does their work translate into actual improvements for
Right.
people?
For communities, that's where it gets really exciting. Imagine a world where small businesses, which are the backbone of our economy, they have the funding they need to grow and create jobs. And imagine those businesses are owned by people who have historically been left out. Women, minorities, veterans, people in rural communities. That's a powerful engine for change.
So it's not just about creating jobs, it's about creating opportunities where they didn't exist before.
Exactly. It's about empowering people, strengthening communities, building a more equitable economy.
That's an inspiring vision. But I'm sure some people would say, come on, businesses are all about profit, not about the greater good.
Right. But I think that's a false dichotomy. Phoenix is showing that you can do both, that you can be profitable and socially responsible. You don't have to choose one or the other.
I like that. I think a lot of people are looking for that kind of message these days. Now, I want to circle back to something you mentioned about Phoenix's commitment to underserved communities. How does that actually play out in what they do?
It's not just lip service, it's really woven into their whole approach. They prioritize working with women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, businesses in rural areas. And they offer specific support and resources to address the challenges those businesses face.
So it's not just about giving them a loan, it's about giving them the tools to really succeed.
Exactly. They know that capital is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. It's not just about getting the loan. It's about building a business that will last.
Absolutely. And that's where their long-term vision comes in. They're not just trying to make a quick buck. They're trying to build a more equitable and sustainable economy for everyone.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of different things, and I'm impressed with what I'm hearing. But before we move on, I want to make sure we talk about education. They've said it's important to educate both borrowers and lenders. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. I think one of the biggest challenges for them is just overcoming all the misconceptions about these loans. People don't know about them or they don't understand how they work.
So what are they doing about that?
Well, they're being proactive, creating educational resources, doing webinars, partnering with community organizations to get the word out. They're also working directly with lenders, educating them about these
So
loans.
they're not just waiting for people to come to them.
No, they're going out and educating the market.
So they're not just a lending company. They're like a resource center, a guide for these small businesses.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They're not just processing loans, they're trying to build a movement.
Now, I've talked a lot about the good stuff, but I think it's important to acknowledge that there are always challenges, potential downsides to any new model. Are there any concerns or risks with this approach, this end-to-end model?
Well, I guess one concern is that if you get too streamlined, too automated, you might lose that personal touch. That human connection is so important for building trust.
Right, so it's about finding that balance.
Exactly. They need to make sure that their process, that it empowers people. It's not just about processing loans.
Sounds like they're walking a tightrope.
Yeah, I think so. But if they can pull it off, the impact could be huge. They have the potential to really change things, make the economy more equitable, more accessible.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot today, and I'm feeling pretty optimistic about the future of small business and the role that Phoenix is playing in it. But I'm sure there's even more to this story.
There is, and that's what we're going to be getting into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore the bigger implications of their work, the challenges they're facing, and the potential ripple effects they could have on the economy as a whole.
I'm excited to hear it. We'll be right back to continue our exploration of Phoenix Lender Services. Stay with us. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Phoenix Lender Services. We've been talking about their mission to kind of shake up the world of small business lending. And we've talked about their approach, their experience, and how they're really committed to serving those underserved communities. But I want to talk about the bigger picture now. What kind of impact could they have on the economy as a whole and on society? Even,
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. You got to think about it. Small businesses are the engine of our economy. They create jobs, they come up with new ideas, and they really revitalize communities. But for a long time, getting the money they need has been a huge problem, especially for businesses in those underserved areas we've been talking about.
so Phoenix is trying to change that.
Exactly. They're breaking down those barriers, leveling the playing field, and it's not just about helping those individual businesses, it's about making the whole economy more inclusive, more dynamic. When more people have a real shot at starting and growing a business, everyone wins.
Okay, I see the economic benefits, but what about the social impact? How does this translate into real changes for people, for their communities?
Well, just imagine, you've got a small business owner who finally gets the money they need. They open that restaurant they've always dreamed of. They hire people from the neighborhood. They get their ingredients from local farmers. And their business becomes a real hub for the community. That's just one example of what this can look like.
So it's about way more than just making money. It's about revitalizing communities.
Absolutely. It's about empowering people to create better lives for themselves and for their families. It's about building a society that's more just, more equitable.
I love that vision. But, I'm sure some people would say, businesses are all about the bottom line. They don't care about the greater good.
Right, but I think that's a false choice. I think Phoenix is a perfect example of how you can do both. You can be profitable and socially responsible. You don't have to pick one or the other.
Yeah, I think people are really hungry for that message right now. It's refreshing. But let's be realistic. There are always challenges. What are some of the things that might stand in their way?
Well, one is just scale. They're a pretty new company. And the need for capital in these communities is huge. It's going to take time and resources to really reach everyone who needs them.
So it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. They need to be smart about how they grow, build partnerships, and keep coming up with new ideas.
Now, what about competition? Are there other companies trying to do similar things?
Oh, for sure. There are other groups working to expand access to capital. But what makes Phoenix different is that end-to-end approach. And their expertise in these specific loan programs, they're not just giving out money, they're providing a whole solution.
So it's like they're setting a new standard.
In a lot of ways, yeah. They're showing the industry what's possible. When you focus on impact, on sustainability, on social justice.
Now, before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something you said before about education. How are they working to educate people about these loan programs?
They're doing a lot. They're creating educational resources, doing webinars. They're even partnering with community organizations so they can reach as many people as possible. And they're working with lenders too, making sure they understand the ins and outs of these programs.
So they're really putting in the effort.
Yeah, they get it. Knowledge is power.
Well, this has been a really incredible conversation. I'm honestly really inspired by what they're doing. It's not just about changing the way loans are made. It's about changing the way we think about business in general.
Totally agree. They're proving that doing good can be good for business. I think we all need to hear that message.
For sure. So for anyone listening who's intrigued by what we've talked about today, what's the best way to learn more?
I would say their website is the best place to start. It's www.phoenixlenderservices.com. You can also find them on social media.
Yeah, and I encourage everyone to check them out, ask questions, explore what they have to offer. You never know, they could be the partner you need to get your business off the ground or to take it to that next level.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Phoenix Lender Services. It's been an amazing journey,
It really has.
and I hope this has inspired everyone listening to think about how businesses can be a force for good in the world. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep believing in the power of small business to change the world.